Okay kids, I'm going to attempt to teach you how to create crystal shapes with long beads. The challenge I am realizing right now is the angle to shoot this at, because I always shoot above when things are flat, but these aren't flat. So let's start and we'll see how it goes. So first things first, we need our long beads, but as you can see, the beads in the middle of this are shorter. Now, it's entirely possible that you can get a long version and a short version. That's what I've done with this little guy here. But let's assume that you can't get a long version of that because there isn't one. I have a trick for you. This is why we need the weird things like the sandpaper or the nail file. I was mentioning in the newsletter that bugle beads shattering is an issue. I actually haven't had a lot of issues with these big ones shattering, but you can see, I'll post photos of these, but you can see these ends. Those are what we're talking about when we're talking about the shatter problem, because these edges are sharp and they will cut your thread. So if you try to make them into something, especially at crystal, where like there's going to be pressure on that joint, it's going to fray your thread and the whole thing's going to fall apart, and that is extremely annoying, and it has happened to me too many times. So I'm giving you fair warning. So what I'm going to show you how to do is to shorten these. I'm going to cut them in half. I'm going to show you how we can cut them in half and have minimal shattering and not sharp edges, so that you can use them to build crystals and have them not cut your thread. So the very first thing that we're going to do, we take our needle nose pliers. You can make a mark on here with your invisible pen. I usually just eyeball it like I do most of my life. So about halfway there, you can see. And basically, you don't even have to go, you don't have to do this very intensely. We're just gonna put a little tiny score mark on the middle. Now, also, the reason that I had you with the like tiny piece of foam is because after you've done a few of these hanging onto this, your fingers tend to get really sore. And after you've done like hundreds of them, you'll have blisters. So that's, hence this makes it easier to turn. But for now, I'm just gonna use my fingers so that you can see what I'm doing. So hopefully you can see here. The sharp part of the pliers, you don't want to put any pressure with the pliers. Like, we're literally just like lightly holding the bead in place. Put no pressure on that bead in that with it sitting between those blades, because otherwise it's just gonna shatter. So all we're doing is so lightly turning it, so light. Like, I guarantee you want to go lighter than you think that you need to, because you really don't need that much of a mark. You just need the tiniest score mark. Again, I'm using my left hand for this, and I'm not putting any pressure with my right hand. Okay, so now you can see there's like just the tiniest little nip there. So small, but that's enough. You have that there, and you can just, it will just snap along that score mark. Now this is what your nail file is for. You just lightly sand it down, and you'll be able to feel with your finger, because these beads are made of glass or resin. So you'll definitely be able to feel if the edge is sharp. And honestly, half the time my edges are way flatter and less sharp than the factory ones. So I'll do a little bit of sanding on both sides. There we go. our crystal strut is gonna have 5 of these. They're not perfectly even, but half the time beads aren't anyway. I mean, you want them to be as even as possible, but we do the best we can. Again, such a tiny little mark there. That's all we're looking for. That's enough. Boom. See? It might take you a couple of times to get the hang of it, because I think the biggest issue here is going to be how much more delicate you go than you think you need to. And honestly, like when I've been tired, I've shattered a billion of these, so it's all good. The only thing you're gonna wanna make sure that you do is clean it up well, because you will get shards in your foot and you'll be like, when did I break a glass here? And you won't have. It will just be tiny specks of resin or glass from the beads. Okay, another thing I'm going to warn you about when it comes to, maybe I'll get rid of this shortest guy here. All right. I'm going to warn you about while you're putting your crystals together, some of your ends, I mean, you want to not use these ones for this at all, because that's definitely going to cut your thread at some point, which is going to be annoying. But also when you're looking at your beads, I'm not going to tell you to sand all of these because that would be crazy. I don't do that. But one edge might be a little rougher than the other edge. So when you have the choice between a sharper edge and a softer edge, always have the sharper edge on your fabric, or towards the flatter part of your crystal. You never want the sharp part to be where there's going to be a join, because even if you have several strands of thread, there's still going to be pressure there and you don't want it fraying, which is what will happen, and then it will unravel and come apart and you'll lose your crystal. So that's not what we want. I'm going to make a loose mark for where we're going to put our crystal, and to get a proper crystal shape, you want to go shorter than your middle strut here. Maybe even like half whatever that is. Again, like a twerp, I eyeball everything. At least for this part, not for client stuff. I'm always banging on about tension because in beading, honestly, it's arguably the most important thing. I used this fabric for this because tension is so important. You can try it on tulle and the stuff that we usually use. I really wanted to be able to see what I was doing, and I wanted to know that there was going to be enough tension to hold my shapes. So this is just cotton broadcloth. But yeah, experiment, see what happens. That sounds like a threat. See what happens. I told you so. Anchoring my thread. And pinning it over here to keep it out of my way. We start off with one long. One short. to the next mark here. Boom, stands up. And we come through this mark here. We do a long and a short. And this, we come down through that one. And we just keep going like that. Long, short, go back down through this guy. Long, short, and come back up through this guy. Put our last short on, go back down through this guy. Here we go. And long. And another long. And you want to go across here to this guy. Also pay close attention to how much thread you have left, because you don't want to get stuck up top with not enough. I'm coming up this guy now. And taking another long. And going down through this guy. It's a little tricky, making sure that your tension is good while also not knocking over your beads, but also very important. I'm gonna come down through this guy. You want to keep an eye on all your joints to make sure that the shape is coming along nicely. Long, go through here, and then come down through this guy. And you can see I don't have that much thread left. So when I go down this time, I'm going to tie it off and rethread. Just make sure you're not twisted. All your joints are fairly even. You might have to take your hoop off out of the clamps and tie this from underneath to make sure that you've got your tension right. This is one of those moments where it's a little bit do as I say, not as I do. I'm tying my knots by feel, but I've made hundreds of these things. You can give it a go, but if you're newer at this, I would recommend just taking your hoop off the clamp, turning it over so you can see what you're doing. All right, I've rethreaded. I'm coming at my strut here. And then I'm gonna pin all of these tails back, keep them out of my way. And then this is our last long. So we put that there, and then it matters sort of where these beads, which ones you're going across, because that affects the shape. You don't want to be going all through all, or just one of them. You want them to be connecting as much as you can. Okay. So now we can do a little bit of play with our tension, because you might notice that there's some loose joints that you have right now. If that's the case, that's all right. I'm going to show you what to do. We're going to do some contingency threading right now. Okay, I'll show you this from the side. All right. So our contingency threading, this is a lot easier with these big, huge bugle beads than it is with the little ones, because there's more space for thread inside of them. You're gonna have to be careful with your contingency threading on little guys, because you're gonna run out of thread or space for thread inside them real quick. So I'm gonna come back through this strut here. Now I'm gonna go around through our middle guys here. All right. So I've gone all the way around my edge pieces. That should feel a bit more stable now. And then I'm gonna go up this. There we go. Do a little shaping with your fingers, really, but that's the gist of it. Make sure everything is pulled nice and snugly. And then you can tie off. That's more or less, that's the gist of those ones. And that's the general concept, is just going through all of your joints and making sure that they're all connected and you've got your contingency threads in there. Once you know the basics like that, then you just play. Oh, that's a bad shatter. Can you see that? That's what they're talking about.